Engineers Scottish region. So I speak to quite a lot of organisations and educational institutions and colleges and things around the country on that role. And I also manage an engineering consultancy where I do a combination of managing projects and training around the country as well. So sort of involved in different regions or different parts of the industry over that time.
So on to Matt, if that's okay.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Matt Blythe. I am one of the founders of a startup that is based in Edinburgh called Continuum Industries. And basically what our company does is engineering software. And that engineering software uses AI to basically design, plan and design infrastructure projects, but at the sort of the early stages of those projects. And yeah, that's me.
Yeah, on to Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill Corr. I'm a Scottish Enterprise Innovation Specialist. For those who don't know it, Scottish Enterprise is one of the 3 economic development agencies in Scotland. My role is to help companies find funding for their R&D and innovation projects at a fundamental level. I work with companies of all sizes, sectors, technologies right across Scotland, so I get a really good insight into what's going on and where are the major trends. I also help, and probably this is where this is perhaps more relevant, I also work with a lot of companies to help them find the resource they require to do R&D projects. And you know, one of the challenges over the years is that Scottish companies do struggle for technology graduates in particular. So, you know, certainly hopefully I can shed a bit of light on what goes on in that space. I'm also a non-executive director for a technology startup, so I understand, you know, I work with that, but also work on spin-outs and so on. So, you know, I'm very embedded in that space.
Thanks, Bill. And last but not least, on to David.
Hi everyone, my name is David Milton. Like Matt, I'm a founder of a startup company called Offshore Survival Systems. We're a pre-revenue marine engineering company that's focusing on health and safety tech, predominantly for the offshore wind sector, but also with applications into commercial shipping and oil and gas. My background is actually in more general business activities, so it's fair to say that I come at this more from a business kind of consulting background rather than necessarily an engineering background. So I'm probably the least qualified and probably the most stupid person in the room, but I'm going to do my best to be of some use to everyone.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much all for introducing yourselves. So I guess over the next 40 minutes or so, I'll be asking the panelists some questions, and hopefully they can shed some insight to you all about some of the experiences they've had and their views on the world. And then for the last 15 minutes, I think Thomas is going to moderate a Q&A session, so you can store up all your questions, put them in the chat, and we'll come through to them at the end of the session. So I guess to start us off, we're really fortunate to be joined by a couple of people who have founded startups in the last few years. And so I guess to open us up, Matt and David, what are some of the key challenges which you faced when creating a business from scratch?
Matt, after you.
Yeah, I'll make a couple of points. The first thing I would just say, which is perhaps not addressing the question directly, but for anyone who's listening and is sort of interested in the idea of setting up a startup and wondering what that idea might be that they want to do and how they're going to do it. In my own experience, what I found, the way that I got involved in this startup that I set up was really just from meeting like-minded people who are interested in similar things to me. And when I was doing a master's at Edinburgh University, I got involved in a big student engineering project, which was around this new type of transportation called Hyperloop. And by meeting people who were involved in that project, we were able to sort of, exchange a lot of ideas, talk about things we were all interested in, which led to sort of basically our idea for setting up a business. So just my first point is, I would, if you think it might be interesting, doing a startup, but you're not really sure what that idea could be, I would just get involved in lots of student societies and projects and things with other people, because you'll find that you might come up with ideas better from working with other people than sort of on your own. So that's the first point. And then second point, in terms of the question that Alex asked about challenges when facing a new when setting up a new business, I think kind of maybe one of the most fundamental things is if you are building a business, then there's sort of a few things you need to think about. One is you need to be solving a problem for someone, a problem that someone cares about, and you need to come up with a solution to that problem that someone will pay for. And then you need to work out whether or not there's a bigger market for your solution. So if you're not sure where to start, look for a problem, think about how you could solve it, and think about who might pay you for it. And if you can do that, then you may find that you can start a business in that area. So that's probably enough from me. So David, if you want to go.
Yeah, I think I think from our experience, certainly, I think the main challenge that any startup's got to overcome really is getting people, whether they are the first staff through the door or the first customers or your co-founders or other stakeholders, getting people to believe in it. You know, the nature of doing a startup is you're bringing something that doesn't exist into the world. So by definition, you need to be unrealistic. And I think a lot of us, our heads instantly go to the product or the service. And yet that's obviously very important. But actually, the more important thing is people believing in what you're trying to do, because you might be trying to take something that's already there and improve on it, or come up with something completely different. But fundamentally, you've got to get people to buy into you. And that will be your first investors, your first staff, your first customers. If they don't buy you, they don't like you, they don't believe in what you're trying to do, you're always going to struggle. And I've lost count of actually the number of times I've met other founders who have got great technology, but they're maybe not people, not very good at building rapport and getting people to buy into them. And so as a result, the business never really gets going. So all I say is, if you are one of those people who struggles to build rapport, then go find a co-founder who's good at that and let them do all the selling. Or if you are someone who know you're good at that, then really hone in and focus on that skill. I know Sam, my co-founder, he's brilliant at it, and we wouldn't be where we are were it not for that skill.
I think it was really interesting that you both touched on people, whether it's getting together with like-minded people or the types of people that you want to kind of build a business with. So that's really interesting.
Can I just add something to that, Alex?
Yeah, of course, Matthew. Yeah.
So my business has been going for about 6 years or so now, and nothing's changed since 6 years ago in what I had to do then and what I had to do now. And I think Matt made a couple of really good points there. The first one is customers are selfish. Customers only care about themselves and what are they going to get out of it. So the question you need to answer is, why do they care? Why are they going to buy it from you? Like Matt said there. So unless they need it or maybe desire it, which is a different type of need, you got to think about why they're going to want it from you and then how you're going to get that message to them. And then the second point Matt said as well was about the people. It's really easy to, especially these days when we're all stuck at home, not able to get out and about, it's really easy to think of a great idea, think that people are going to need it and get busy and work on it. And then you go to launch it and people either don't want it, they don't understand it or something. So don't underestimate the amount of work you need to do in talking to friends, networks, customers, potential clients, and just get out there and get away from your routine of doing the work and talking to people, because word of mouth is free advertising as well. So the more people you get on board, the better help you can get from that.
Yeah, and I think there's a big element of becoming too close to your baby as well, isn't there? And not taking the blinkers off and looking up and seeing what the sector you're targeting actually needs. I think that's crucial. So Bill, you spend an awful lot of time working with startups or companies of all ages. What's the number one piece of business advice that you'd give to these kinds of companies?
Certainly from a business perspective is understand your customer. Too often technology startups and spin outs are based on technology And sometimes they're a solution looking for a problem. And you really don't want to start from that perspective. Start from the perspective of understanding your market. You know, what is the price point? You know, what color would they like it? You know, and I think that the guys touched on that earlier, that that's exactly where you need to be. So before you start developing something, really, you may have done some feasibility and so on, but don't blow too much cash until such time as you absolutely know what you're trying to achieve. Once you know that, then you know, and I think that the notion of being good at the technology, but you also have to be good at the business. And you know, and the challenges, I think, going back to the original question, are the same thing. Is it's all about resource. You know, typically when you're in a small techie business, you're limited for resource, technology resource, business resource, financial resource. So the good thing is, though, you know, coming from my standpoint, is there's lots of help and support out there. You know, when you look at the R&D and I support within, particularly in the UK, you know, through the catapults and catalysts, you know, your group's a great one for the offshore renewable teams and so on. So I think that, you know, go and find out where is the help and support, where is the guidance, where is the free money. There's lots of free money out there through groups like Interface and through, as I say, the innovation centres, Scottish Enterprise, etc., etc. There's lots and lots of free help and support. So go find it, collaborate with other groups and organisations. You know, have a, you know, by all means, be very clever about your protecting your IP. You know, and that's probably a completely separate session, but you know, as I say, I think that that's what you have to do. But as I say, the number one is know your customer.
We're really lucky in Scotland, like you said there, Bill, of the amount of support, you know, that you've got with Business Gateway and all of these places. There's so many people that you can ask who have done it before that you can get expert advice off. So, you know, you don't even have to pay for most of these services.
Yeah, and I suppose to move the conversation on a little bit towards kind of, I guess, skills and things like that the audience might be interested in developing. You know, I think a lot of the audience is going to be pretty well progressed in their degree disciplines and their degree programs. But I suppose an open question to the whole panel is, what other skill sets are crucial for budding young engineers or other technical individuals who are looking to start their careers? You know, what are some of the non-technical skills that people really need to build up to grow themselves and their careers going forwards? Maybe start with Matt, if that's so.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what to say. I guess it depends on what role you're going to play in as an engineer. I think if you're an engineer who's looking to get more involved in business, a business type role, then obviously it's what some of the guys have already touched on, being able to talk to other people, being able to kind of empathize with customers and kind of show that you care about their problems and so on. I would say that's probably kind of what I think are sort of some of the kind of key skills if you're in a kind of a more business facing role. I'll probably let other people answer for kind of more engineering heavy roles.
Certainly, I think that things are changing, particularly in technology businesses, and the way in which teams operate. You know, historically, individuals, engineers would work on their own, and that's no longer the case. You know, technology companies work in teams, disparate teams. You know, I think that, you know, the notion of agile approaches to the way in which technology businesses work nowadays. So I think if you're working on your softer skills, it's all about being able to communicate. That's a key point, because that lots of companies are now getting everyone into teams, and for you to get your point across, you have to be able to work with others rather than just being able to work with yourself. So yeah, that's certainly something that we see a lot now. Companies now looking to recruit not only technology people, but people who have these softer skills, and they match them. So it's all about having teams of disparate personalities as well as skill sets.
Yeah, I think that diversity piece is crucial. A team that's all good at the same thing won't get very far, but if you've got lots of different things that you're bringing to the table, like, you'll go an awful lot further as a business, especially a small business, I think. Matthew or David, have you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, I suppose I think as a non-engineer, one thing I found with working with engineers is, and I suppose more technically minded individuals is, I think skills perspective, it's communication. All of us talk in acronyms far too much and jargon, and it's very easy to forget that often the people we're speaking to don't understand all the vernacular that we use on a day-to-day basis, and being able to take very complex things and explain it in a way that an 8-year-old could understand, I think is one of the most important skills. And the best technically minded people I've met are those who are actually, they might not be the most brilliant in terms of their smarts, but actually what makes them fantastic is their ability to communicate very complex ideas simply.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I think that's something I get asked a lot during my work when I'm speaking to either companies trying to get them to explain their technology better, but also internally speaking to kind of senior stakeholders within my own organization. You'll send them something you've been working on and they'll say, well, so what? Explain it to me like I'm 5. I don't have the time to do the background and understand this myself. So you need to do a better job of translating what it is that you're doing. Matthew, you coming in there?
Yeah, I think if you look at a business side of it, if you're working either as a startup business or managing a business or even within somebody else's organization, finance is really critical. So things like cash flow, budgeting, and just the basic understanding of how to do spreadsheets and balance sheets and profit and loss, and also project management skills. I think even if you're not working in projects, the skills you get from working in a project, we've already mentioned team and communications, but there's planning with time, resources, and managing all those sorts of areas. And then I think if you look at your personal skills as an engineer, I think the 2 areas that I see the trends are increasing are renewables and energy. So hydrogen, turbines, solar panel, if you're not in the UK as much maybe. And then also the digital technologies that Bill started to mention there with artificial intelligence and digital twin and data science and all those digital ones. I think they're going to be the ones that are going to really be in demand.
I think also being able to good presentation skills are absolutely fundamental. Work with lots of companies who are trying to present a project to me, and their presentation skills are really poor. It's very much a selling piece. Being able to, having good slides, so there's lots of good help online as to what a good slide looks like, and it's not 500 words per slide, absolutely not. So less is more, and having really good presentation techniques, because quite often you're trying to sell a concept into your bosses or a customer, and if you get good presentation skills, that really helps with getting that message over.
I think that really links back to what David was saying at the start about people need to believe in what you're doing, and a good presentation goes a long way towards helping someone believe in what you're doing. And I suppose hopefully we'll have time to move on to some topics around investment, because I think that pitching for investment's another kind of crucial skill for a growing business. But I suppose to link back to what Matthew was mentioning there about digital technologies and these kinds of things, when we got together as a panel to kind of meet one another a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that came up was the subject of programming skills for young engineers. And I guess how important do you see programming skills being for engineers of the future? I think Matthew, you had some thoughts on this when we met up previously.
I think it was Matt that was you work in that sort of area, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to sort of give my view on that. So we're a software startup, and we have at the moment 14 of us. And out of those 14 people, 12 people can code, and 2 people can't. And obviously we are a tech business, so we're more kind of biased towards that than say your typical engineering firm. So it's not perhaps a normal example. But I would say that in some of the engineering firms that we work with, the kind of people they're really, really interested in hiring are people who, have an understanding of both an engineering discipline like civil engineering or mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, as well as the kind of data science and programming skills. Because a lot of what those kind of companies are trying to do now is to create kind of digital solutions or software products to sell to their clients. And they're trying to translate kind of engineering into kind of engineering ideas into software. And obviously that's a lot easier if you have someone who can both program as well as understand the thing that they're programming. So we're quite lucky because a lot of our people in our company do have that skill, but I can see sort of out there in the sector, there's not many people like that. So if you can pick up programming, or if you can pick up, like, say, a good understanding of things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, then even understanding the principles is pretty useful. So I think I don't really see a downside to engineers having these skills in the future, and I think at the very least it will make you more attractive to potential employers.
So the languages are they? Sorry, Alex.
No, so yeah.
What sort of programming languages are you talking about people should learn in your experience?
So the programming language that we write in is Python, and the main reason for that is because it's probably some people know different languages, but this one is probably the easiest one to pick up quickly and for everyone to use, kind of thing. So Python is definitely a good one, and there are lots of online courses and stuff you can take on Python. You know,
and out of your team, Matt, how many people kind of learn their programming skills through formal qualifications during their degree? How many kind of just pick them up in their own time out of kind of interest initially, and how many have learned on the job now that they're working for Continuum?
Yeah, so in our case, actually, when we first started the company with like 9 people, we didn't really have many. Maybe had like 1 or 2 people who were formal kind of computer science grads. Everybody else was kind of largely kind of an engineer who had done a bit of programming in their spare time. And yeah, as we've gone on, some of the people we've hired, again, were not like trained computer scientists. They're engineers who have basically converted to programmers, or you know, in some cases they've had to learn on the job. So, you know, we hired somebody who you know, was a programmer but had never worked on anything like what we work on or used the same programming languages, but they have just learned it on the job, and you know, they're doing well. So yeah, we don't have like 12 people who all did computer science in our company.
Bill, were you wanting to come in there?
Yes, and absolutely correct. And I think depending on which sort of companies you join, the smaller companies are great at allowing you to develop your skill sets. I've seen some fabulous things done on Excel, you know, with a bit of maths and a bit of programming, and you can do a lot of things on that. But some of the larger companies may want you to have good experience on some of the design packages. So find out whichever the sort of standard design packages are. Make sure you're pretty au fait with those as well. But yeah, I think it just depends at which end of the spectrum of the companies that you go to, what will they will expect. But I've always taken CPD opportunities to go on courses and expanding your knowledge, because you know it's always beneficial somewhere along the line.
And David, you know, Offshore Survival Systems is a pretty specialist company in a lot of ways. You know, there's not many people on working on kind of unmanned life-saving vessels for offshore wind farms. Are there any particular skill sets that you've found that you need to bring into the team that are a little bit unusual or a little bit interesting?
I mean, it's a really good question. Yeah, I think the one thing that one's always got to get clear on is what your individual role is in the company. You know, so either you're going to be one of those people, so maybe more towards kind of Matt and the other scale, where you know you've got some specialist guys who are very good at coding. And if that's your thing, then cool, lean into it. If it's not, that's okay. But I think you've just got to get clear on what the role is. And I think on things like kind of technical coding and those kind of engineering skills and things like that, I think whilst I, for instance, wouldn't know a piece of code if it slapped me in the face, what I do need to be able to know is I need to know if a coder's, to be honest, but trying to pull my leg, or if they're being honest with me. So I'm often overseeing projects or working with people who are specialists in an area that I know nothing about. And often in my role, and I know in some of the other senior guys' role, our job is we've still got to motivate these people. We've still got to kind of set deadlines to them and agree deliverables. And so we've got to have a bit of a working understanding, but more importantly, we've got understanding about what motivates them as an individual, and be able to spot when someone's essentially just stuck in a kind of a problem mentality and all they want to do is throw up reasons why something won't work, or if they're in more of a solution mentality where I've got this problem and this is what I think we should do with it.
Yeah, so just before we move off the skills there as well, Alex, Bill just reminded me something else when he said people can do really good coding in Excel. I've seen some pretty decent drawings in Excel, funnily enough. And I suppose that's where I thought of, I think, design skills in general, so the design process, but then using the software for design. So, we're moving away from the 2D sort of AutoCAD drawings into the 3D modeling. It's amazing how young people now are when they can learn how to do really good 3D modeling in Inventor or Fusion or SolidWorks or something, and then that's going to move them also into 3D printing opportunities and manufacturing that way. So the design skills, being able to read, interpret and do drawings, whether it's 2D or 3D, that's never going to go away. So I think that's a really good skill to have. And I know I struggle sometimes to find good designers that can't just, not ones who can just draw things that you tell them to draw, but understanding the fundamentals behind why are they doing it? How does this fit? How does a machine shop going to machine that if I design it that way, and understand the principles behind it? So they're really skills that I find will be in demand.
It kind of goes back to that thing again, Matthew, of understanding the problem, doesn't it? Of getting your head around the problem space. And I think you put it really well. Why are you doing this? And you're not just drawing something for the sake of it. It's
exactly.
And I think it also changes the dynamic for a lot of companies, that they can actually go straight to a photoreal rendering without ever having a detailed design. Take it to market. What do you think of that? And then get some changes before you actually go through the traditional route. Would be concept, detailed design, then build it, and then take it to market, and then they don't like it. So it's much easier now. These packages are so powerful that you can take something to market where it never really exists in the real world until it has to be, and by that time it's tweaked and twiddled with so that it's probably more likely to succeed. So I think that these things are massively powerful now.
I think that does a couple of things as well, doesn't it, Bill? It kind of shortens your time to failure, which for companies is often as valuable as being strung along for a long time. But it also helps you to sell your vision as a company. Again, going back to that point which was raised earlier, if you can show someone a 3D render of what you're trying to achieve, it's a hell of a lot easier to describe it than it is using a plan view and an elevation view and things like that.
Or 3D print it and you get to hold it in your hand and say, here's a scale model or full size model of what I've just drawn. I don't quite get it as a 2D drawing on paper, but here it is, hold it. Now tell me if you like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Matt touched very, very briefly on it earlier, but I guess for any company to become sustainable, ultimately it's going to have to sell something at some point. And sales, I guess it conjures images of kind of double glazing salesman door to door, but that's not really what it is in the engineering world. So I guess sales might seem a bit alien to engineers at first, but Matt, I guess fundamentally, can engineers sell things?
Yeah, I think so. So, for example, like our CEO, our co-founder, he's a civil engineer by background, but he's good at sales, and it involves not every engineer wants to do sales, and that's fine. Like if you're more interested in solving technical problems, that's fine. If you're quite interested in what your customers are doing, say how they're using your solution or your service and what problems they have, and you enjoy kind of interacting with them, you might find that actually you're quite well suited to sales, because those are some of the skills that you need. And there's one of those things is obviously listening to them and asking them lots of questions. It can often be tempting to kind of, when you talk to customers, to show them everything you can do and kind of like, show off how good your solution is. But actually what you need to do is ask them what they're worried about and how you could help them. And then, your job is largely to go back to your technical team, to other engineers, and explain that problem to your technical team, and work out as a team, how you can potentially solve their problem.
I think it's much more of a two-way process than is maybe immediately apparent, isn't it?
Exactly. And it doesn't mean that if you're an engineer and you're doing sales, it doesn't necessarily mean that you only do sales and you don't do any engineering stuff. If say we're a software company, you are driving some of the kind of the features that you need to add to the software, because you're the one interacting with the customer. And so what the customer wants, and you're trying to explain to your team that we need to develop this so that the customer can do this. So there's still a kind of a significant aspect of communicating and understanding the engineering. It doesn't mean all you do is sell. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
And David, I guess a big part of selling things is understanding your customers and the market that you're working in. You and I both work in offshore wind, which is a very exciting but kind of quite or relatively young and growing market in the scheme of things. So I guess, how do you go about navigating a new sector? How do you go about identifying who might be potential customers? How do you go about your market research?
Yeah, I think the easiest way I can sum that up is go make friends. My father used to tell me when I was a child that, fundamentally people only do business with other people they like. So if people don't like you, they're not going to do business with you. And actually, in reality, I know terms like market research, I'm always just slightly skeptical of, because you can go and, for instance, do a lot of good desk research on Google and find out connections and where people work and stuff, and that's useful. But in reality, it's always going to come down to the quality and the quantity of relationships that you can build in a particular sector. So if you know that I've got a product or a service, it's very applicable to this sector, then yes, obviously you're going to start on the internet. You're going to start by looking through LinkedIn and finding people. And at some point, you're going to have to start picking up the phone. And I actually think from a sales perspective, having done a lot of this in my career, my belief is, generally speaking, you can't sell anything to anyone. If you've got a product or service and it's of value to someone else, then they either will or they won't buy it. And you can't pull the wool over someone's eyes. All you need to do is find out what they're after, and do you have a match? And if you get on well and there is a clear match, it will be really easy. And if you don't, then that's not going to be the case. And so I think actually kind of simplifying it down to looking like, seeing relationship building, sales, market research as, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to make some friends, I'm going to talk to people about my product. If they don't like it, if they're not interested in it, I'm going to find out why, because that could be really useful feedback to the kind of the development team, and kind of learn by iteration there, and actually not being precious and not worried about people telling you no. And if you're having a friendly conversation, then it's much easier to get that feedback than if you're having a sales pitch. So yeah.
And Matthew, do you have any kind of advice for developing business, and any skills that might be useful for those kinds of activities, and how to go about practicing and developing those skills?
I think if we differentiate sales from marketing, perhaps. So sales is about closing the deal, getting the money in the door, and keeping the business running, whereas marketing is more about publicizing what you do, making those connections, and working with people. And I think by default now, whether you're an engineer or anyone else, we're all marketing, because we're on social media, we're all networking, we're all getting that message out. So an engineer can absolutely be a good or an important marketing person. If you're working for a business, what you do and what people see of you is what they're going to think of that business. If you're going for a job, you're marketing yourself. So whatever's on social media, people are going to look it up when they go and interview you. People are going to look up your feedback when they go and try to do business with you. So every trail that we leave is marketing ourselves. So whatever image you want to portray to potential employers or potential customers, I think that's important to think about what they're going to see as that image.
I think that's some really helpful advice, especially for young people just about to start their career in terms of going out and starting to apply for jobs. So I guess to move on to, I guess, sales and business development is one way to bring money into a business. Often, I guess, at an early stage, when you're still developing your first product or service, you need to look for kind of alternative sources of funding. So Bill, you work with a really broad range of companies, and a large part of your role is to help them with funding and identifying potential avenues for that. Now, how important is funding at the early stages of a company?
For a technology business, it's absolutely critical because there could be sometimes a number of years before you get your first sale. So to fund your research and development phases, you're going to do a number of things. You're going to hopefully find where all the free money is. You're going to look where all the grants, which are perhaps contributory, and obviously equity funding as well. There'll be potentially a series of funding rounds, and hopefully if you can get sales as you go through that, but that's not always the case. So having a really sound business plan that articulates what you're trying to do, what VC or Scottish Enterprise, whoever, want to know that you've got a sound plan behind your sales. And I said to companies, it's really important that someone within the business is responsible for understanding where the grants particularly are. There's, you can get, some grants can be 100%. The SBRI, other groups and sectoral organisations can fund sometimes your R&D at 100%. With no ties to IP and so on. So if you're, some of the very best companies I work with are very, very good at finding where the grant mechanisms are. And they're not always that obvious. If you're thinking of Innovate UK or things like that, then perhaps you're not thinking deeply enough. So we say to companies, have a really good strategy, make sure that you're on all the alerts for all the groups and organizations that are out there, because they're often call based. So you need to know when the call opens, because probably 3 months later, the call's going to close and you'll have missed it, as I say. So go on PCS, for instance, so the things like SBRI and other government calls, particularly the 100% funded things, but know where it all is and where it fits in with what you need. But as I say, I think that having this very rounded approach to grants, equity, business plans is as important as the technology.
No, I think that's really sound, Bill. And you mentioned kind of equity there. David, you're a growing business and you've been successful in bringing private investment into the business. I guess, can you, this isn't something that a lot of the audience will be familiar with. Can you just give a bit of insight into that journey of, courting investors and securing investment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Offshore Survival Systems, we've been through 2 funding rounds already. We're currently in our 3rd. So we've done Angel, we've done Seed, we're now doing Series A. We're at the stage now where the raise we're doing are in the millions. It's big stuff. I think the first thing I'd say about raising cash when it's private equity, private investment, is it's bloody time consuming. It is all encompassing. And the thing that I've observed through that journey is that it's very easy to get kind of caught up on yourself. And actually the trick is always put yourself in the, I suppose in the eyes of the investor. Is if someone's going to invest £1 million in your company, they're going to want to see probably £4 or £5 million back, at least, if not more, maybe £10 million back, for it to really raise their eyebrows. And so you've got to have a plan. You've got to have a credible plan of how you're going to do that. And, particularly in early stage, the investors know that life doesn't go to plan. So you can make the best plan that you want, and it won't go to plan. But what they're investing in is you and your management team and your ability to maneuver and respond to opportunities as they arise. But they're going to grill you. It's going to be very time consuming. And I think if I were giving kind of one piece of advice for people looking into it, is I think if you're going to do it, go big. you're going to show someone a plan, and no one ever is going to say, "Oh, you're really sort of short selling yourself there." I tell you what, we'll value up a bit, and then we'll take less of your company for investment. No, they're always going to chip you down. It's a thankless task. You're flogging yourself. You're selling your soul. It's draining. But go big, because people will chip you down. So start big, and at least then you'll end up somewhere you want to be. If you're going out there sort of trying to raise, say, £100,000, and you've got a plan that says, "Oh, I might be able to turn that around into £400,000 in a few years," you might get some investment. But in reality, there are 10,000 other businesses lining up trying to do the same thing. The thing that we've found helped us offshore survival systems is we've gone big, we've gone large, and we have put some ambitious scales out there, and we've gone for big fundraising targets, and we've gone for big sales targets, but it's paying off. And we're getting chipped down, but we're still ending up in a really really good position.
I think you mentioned there that it's about the kind of management team's ability to pivot and jump over hurdles and things. I think something that's not immediately obvious is that investing in a tech company is probably only 25 or 30% about the tech. There's a series of other factors in there that investors are going to consider, and it's mostly around the people and the team who are leading it forwards, and the investors' confidence in their ability to take it forwards. I don't know if any of the other panelists have got thoughts on this kind of private investment space. Matt?
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. So we've been through a couple of funding rounds. So the first funding round we did was straight out of university, and we raised about £250,000 from one individual, and they basically gave us that investment to start our company, not on the basis of our plan or our tech, which didn't really exist at that point, but just on the basis that they believed in our team. In fact, the first business plan we ever wrote and showed this investor, they said was crap. So we were like, okay, excellent. We'll figure this out. So yeah, they really backed us on the basis of our team and some of the things we had done whilst at university. So and the age of that team was kind of from just trying to work it out, from 22 to 26. So for anyone listening, like we were pretty young and didn't have all the answers. Still don't. And then last year we were able to raise another round, which was about £1.5 million from some various investors, and we were able to raise that just because we were able to show that we'd made quite a lot of progress, basically, in terms of sort of our tech, but also kind of with customers and so on. So yeah, we didn't know exactly what we were doing when we set out, but we had a good team, and the investors believed in us, basically.
Yeah, Bill.
And I was also going to say not to forget the taxman. The taxman is a great supporter of innovation in R&D tax credits, R&D capital allowances, patent box. If you can get a UK first file patent into your product, it cuts your tax bill in half. Things like EIS and SEIS also helps, and I'm sure the guys have registered for these schemes, and again, it benefits the investor. So again, investors would expect that, but it's great support. So that, I think through the entire journey, from getting grants and VC and getting tax supports right all the way through to the commercialization phases. So keeping that in mind, having a very strategic approach to the investment piece.
And so, Matthew, changing tack a little bit, you're involved in a lot of training, for businesses and individuals. I guess a company that's standing still, it probably isn't going to be a sustainable company for very much longer. And training, continual improvement, whatever you want to call it, a really crucial part of building a sustainable business. How important is it for companies to factor these kinds of things into their plans?
I think it's critical to a business to have people who are continuously updating their skills, because not only does technology and things change that we have to keep up with, like some of the areas we've talked about, but even just for our personal selves to, let's say, for instance, someone goes to college or university or something, and they'll learn the fundamental skills to be able to get something in the workplace. But most of the time, the actual training that they've done in those courses are the skills that they need to do the job. And most companies will then train you in those specific areas, whether it's informally or formally. So you've got to keep on training throughout. The other side of that is if people are members of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers or civil engineers or chemical or anything like that, you now need to actually keep up your career professional development and keep records of your CPD. And if you don't do that, you can get audited and you can actually, worst case, lose your membership. So it's actually a requirement for any of these institutions now that are managed by the council there that you keep that up to date. And it doesn't have to be paid training. I mean, just think about like tonight's event. Tonight you can count this as CPD. This is training because you're learning about things. You can go to webinars, all sorts of places. So just because you think you need to get training doesn't mean, well, we need to have a budget. We're not making any money. We've got to spend money. That's definitely one thing, but there's plenty of other ways to get good training in other ways as well.
I think that's really valuable, Matthew. And I think, with one eye on the clock, we're kind of moving swiftly towards the Q&A session. So I'll just ask one final question to each of you. And hopefully it's a bit of a thought provoker for the audience, but one by one, what's one thing which you never ever thought you would do during your career, which you've ended up doing? So yeah, maybe start with Bill. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I had the first 20 years of my career, I was in IBM, one of the biggest companies in the world. And I thought I would be there forever. I never thought I would leave IBM. A lot of the things that we spoke about tonight, I was involved in all of the latest technologies over a 20-year period, and I thought that I was in paradise and didn't see the downturn in the electronics industry, particularly in Scotland. So yeah, moving into more traditional, I left IBM and then went to making concrete roof tiles because robotics was my background. So I never saw that leap from the very latest technology and the very latest products into concrete roof tiles.
Brilliant. I guess going anti-clockwise on my screen, Matthew, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm from Melbourne in Australia originally, and I suppose when I was doing my studies, one thing I probably never thought that I would do was be sat at home, get a phone call on a weekend from an offshore oil rig to say, we've just broken something, can you get out here on a helicopter in the middle of winter and come and tell us how we're going to repair a stand that a 400-ton piece of equipment is going to sit on. We need it fixed now. So it's probably something the furthest away from an industry that I thought I would be in down in Melbourne at that time.
David, on to you.
Yeah, I suppose trying to keep it as relevant as I can to the conversation so far. I suppose, I live down in Shropshire, and we moved our business to Edinburgh because that's where our talent was. So I decided to make the decision to move the business I'm a co-founder of into a different country because it was the right thing to do for a business. Means I, even during COVID, spent a lot of time on the train in my car, but it's the right thing for the business, and that's got to come first.
And last but not least, Matt.
Before I did this startup, I worked in consultancy, and I actually lived and worked for a few years in Kenya, where I was working in their electricity sector. And when I was doing that, then I couldn't really imagine myself founding a startup a few years later, doing software and so on. So it feels strange to kind of look back, but I guess it kind of just shows that like anyone, I think anyone can start their own company with the kind of a bit of enthusiasm and some and I think some good teammates as well helps. So yeah, I didn't really never saw myself going down that path, but here I am.
Brilliant. And I think for me, I started off doing an environmental chemistry degree. Quickly realized that I didn't really like looking in a test tube, and so swapped over to environmental science. And at that point, I didn't really know what offshore wind was. And I certainly never ever heard of a job title called innovation manager. So I think something as simple as that it's something that I never expected to be doing in my career. I think it's kind of true what they say when you're at school and stuff, that maybe the job that you're going to end up doing hasn't been invented yet. I genuinely believe in that as a sentiment, because it's certainly been true in my case. An offshore wind innovation manager wasn't a thing when I left high school even. So I guess don't plan out your career path too far in advance, because you might miss some really exciting opportunities along the way. I guess thank you very much to all four of you. I think that's been a really interesting discussion, and hopefully it's triggered some really good questions from the audience. So I guess Thomas, over to you to try and pull some of those out and get the last little drops of insight out from.
No, that was fantastic. Really interesting. I mean, I think just in general, from my perspective, this is kind of uncharted territory, going off into the Amazon type of business. So it's really interesting to hear about, how to navigate that, and some of the stuff you just have no idea about what's going on, and also having the confidence to just do it, really, and knowing that it can be done. I think that's half the battle, is just knowing someone else can do it. So why not me? So really interesting. But I'll just fire into the questions. So the first is, how do you find and choose team members? So I think that was near the start, where you talk about having a team around you that you believe in. So how do you kind of find those people and even choose them, maybe in a hiring process?
I'll start if you want. There's two key elements of hiring staff. One is the personalities, and the other one's the skill set. Skill sets you can normally extract that information from CVs and so on. So you understand their qualification history and so on. So that's relatively simple. I think the key one that a lot of companies now know, and probably Matthew's got a better insight into this, is the notion of their personalities. And more companies now are looking at psychometric testing to try and get a sort of personality profile of the person. So they already have a personality profile of the team, and they know some personalities will fit and some that won't. So if you're going for interviews, don't be too surprised if they start to do some psychometric testing to a degree. And that gives you there a better fit. I think, as someone mentioned earlier, I think it was Alex mentioned, that if everyone's the same personality in the team, you're going to struggle. So it's all about getting a balance, and that's how many companies do it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, as well, from just a question, I will go back to the chat, but just from my own perspective, what kind of opportunities and situations can you recommend to not only undergrads, but maybe young graduates, that they need to put themselves in to meet these kind of people and develop these kind of skills that we've been talking about?
I would, one thing I would suggest is, if you're interested in working for a company, or you think you're interested, go on LinkedIn, find someone there who maybe is a few years older than you, and if they have some link to you, great. Like if they went to the same university or something, and then just write to them. Just send them a short email and say, hi, I'm really interested in working for your company. I'd like to find out more about what like your job looks like, and essentially, like, can we have a kind of a virtual coffee or a coffee or whatever? And most people are pretty flattered to be contacted, kind of like, oh, someone wants to talk to me about what I do, and don't really mind. And if they don't reply, then who cares? I would just, if you think you're interested in working for a particular company, just find someone at that company, or find multiple people and message them. And you might find you learn quite a lot about, what their job's like, and it might even help you get a job if they think you're a good fit. So as well as going to events, like, just approach people. You'll find that people are often more friendly than you expect.
No, I think that's
yeah. Sorry, I think on that too is the networking part is really important, and getting people that you can talk to. I mean, don't underestimate phoning up people as well, rather than just messaging them, because sometimes it's much better just to phone them directly and just talk to them there if you can actually do that. But also an option, if depending on your finance situation, is maybe go and offer to volunteer to work at a place that you really like, build up some experience in some of those industries that you're keen on working in. If they'll have you, even if it's just a week, you can put on your CV and say, look, I did weeks of work in this area versus somebody who's come straight out of uni with absolutely no experience, perhaps. So the more actual experience you can get in workplaces, the more employable you think you'd be.
Yeah, I think an interesting one from, or I suppose I didn't find it interesting at the time. My dad is a civil engineer. He used to drag me along to Institute of Civil Engineering evening meetings when I was a teenager. And, at first I was like, oh, God, do I have to? But actually, I found them really interesting, as loath as I was to admit it to him. And I ended up going to one while I was doing my master's degree. And the speaker at that event was talking about district heating schemes. And I ended up doing my master's thesis with the company that he represented. So, I guess events like these where you could potentially go along and meet someone that has an opportunity. That networking piece is really valuable.
That's great. Thank you. So I think another one is regarding investments, how much money goes to the project, how much money goes into side things such as paperwork, and is a salary included in the investments? And what is the timeline expected for ROI, which you might need to explain that acronym as well to me.
Oh, that's return on investment.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, normally when you're looking for investment, you really need to build a business plan. So decide what activities have to be done, what does the team look like, and so on. So you really need to build up this financial picture of how much money you need, and over which period. So that's the key. You're right. Different VC will have different ROI. A lot of VC are looking for an exit within 3 to 5 years, and so on. So it's understanding what your potential investors are looking to get out of you. If you've got, I work in projects in startup mode that lasted 8-9 years, and lots of VC simply won't support that. So it's about understanding what does your VC want, how do you potentially accelerate your R&D and so on, in order that you meet their ROI requirements. So it's key that you understand that to begin with.
Interesting. Another question here is what changes are required, if any, in Scotland and the UK to reduce friction in startups?
I'm not 100% sure what does that mean by reduce friction?
I think probably saying, for example, Matt and David, in your experience, is there any barriers which you felt were maybe still needing to come down, or extra help, or pockets of maybe area learning investment which you maybe didn't find readily available?
I think, I think if I'm coming to answer that one, to be honest, generally speaking, yeah, of course, there's barriers up there. You've got to convince people to invest in you, this kind of stuff. But in my experience, some of those barriers exist for a very good reason, i.e., it takes a lot of grit to run a startup. You've got to put up with a lot of crap. And if you can't get it off the ground because you don't have the strength of character to get around and have 100 no's before you get your first yes, then that's the in my opinion, that's the universe saying you shouldn't be in business. Because it's competitive for a reason, it's difficult for a reason, because if it wasn't, then everyone would be doing it and it wouldn't quite work properly. So I wouldn't necessarily say there's barriers in the way. I think the one thing I've noticed from working in previous to offshore survival systems, but consulting with companies from a number of different countries, is as Brits, we've got a pretty conservative attitude towards things. And for some reason, it seems startups tend to be outside of the digital space, and Matt, I'm sure your digital experience is different, tend to be a bit kind of wary of raising funds. So our default is I've got to go off and sell a few things first and make my cash organically. And then, the whole raising money is just something that only tech firms do. If you go to the States, for instance, it's a very different culture. I've got a business, fine. First day, let's go and get investment and let's go big. And I think that's a cultural thing. But fundamentally, it all comes down to the attitude of the owners.
That's great, really interesting. So another question here is, how did you, so I guess following on from that, is how did you get your first customers to start up, and what would you do differently now to get your first customers?
For us, essentially we had developed a kind of early prototype of our tech, and we were going around and talking to people who we thought would want to buy it, and they didn't want to buy it, or they did, but they would say things like, yeah, we could maybe buy it if it also did these other million things, or if only we can use it and no one else can, type thing. And so, yeah, like as David was kind of saying in his previous point, we got a lot of no's, or a lot of people saying, yeah, that's really interesting, but then, you know, nothing happens. Then I guess we got a little bit lucky. We actually, we went to, funny enough, we went to an Institution of Civil Engineers event. And afterwards we were chatting to a couple of people from an engineering firm, and they started talking about this problem that they had, and how they weren't sure how they were going to solve it. And it was this massive project coming up. And we kind of said, well, actually, some of our tech can probably help with that. It's not sort of set up to help with what you're describing, but like the principles of it, yeah, we could help. And they're like, well, that's super interesting. Why don't you come in for a meeting next week? And we had a very long meeting the next week, and basically concluded that, yeah, we can do this. And we started working with them the next day. So it was a bit lucky, but like lucky in the sense that we'd already got like 100 no's. So you just have to keep going. Kind of thing. Just don't give up. And I think the person who posed that question said, what would you do differently now to get your first customer? What we would definitely do differently is we would have gone out and talked to more of these firms before investing a lot of time in developing something that we thought they wanted. Because we thought we knew best, and we didn't. If we'd actually gone and spoken to more of these firms, even without like having a product or anything, we could have found out like what they were really interested in and just started building that. So it's never too early to start talking to companies or potential customers and find out what's actually on their mind, not what you think is on their mind.
No, that's great. I think one more question. I'm a bit over, but it's a really good question to end on. So it's kind of, what are your top 3 tips to succeed in the general working environment? So I think that's more looking at kind of skills you need to develop, opportunities you need to be aware of, and kind of just your general approach to either as a young grad or maybe interviewing or also starting your own business. What top 3 tips? If we go around, and then unfortunately, I think we'll probably end it there. So start with Bill, maybe.
Yeah, I think we discussed it earlier, and there's a common theme about good communication. You know, communicate with your co-workers. You know, be a good networker. You know, I think that if you get everyone to like you, then they'll buy into you and they'll tell you things and so on. So I would say my top single tip is be a good communicator.
Great. Alex, maybe?
Yeah, so I guess to follow up with a couple of tips from me. One would be, don't be afraid to get involved in all sorts of different things. You never know, you might find something that you're really, really passionate about and really interested in. And the other would be, don't be afraid to say you don't know, or that you need some support with something, because nobody knows all the answers. So yeah, I guess those would be my 2.
That's great. We'll go Matthew, maybe.
I'm going to go with something that's really simple, but maybe underestimated, and it's enthusiasm. So if you're walking around the workplace, don't walk around with your hands in your pockets and your head down and walking around. Smile and be happy. Say hello to everybody that goes past you, even if you don't know them. Walk around with a piece of paper in your hand or a clipboard or something to make it look like you're busy and doing something. And I think that goes a long way for that image of, you know, being busy, being happy, being enthusiastic. That makes a big difference.
That to me is just a great answer from an Australian man in Scotland who's just come across the most miserable people. Like, why are these people not smiling? I mean, yeah, but that's great. And then David.
Yeah, I'd say my top tip, kind of key to professionalism, is just very simple. Just do what you say you will do. You know, so many people they erode confidence and trust in their peers because they make promises they don't deliver on. So golden rule, only do what you say you will do.
That's fantastic. And then I think we'll finish on Matt, and then we'll call it there, and I'll thank you all.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone made good suggestions, so I don't know if I've got loads to add, but maybe just one tip would be just keep asking for feedback. Keep asking people, like, you know, can you give me some feedback on how I did this job? Like, did I do it well? What could I improve on? You know, and people kind of people admire that, like that you're open to sort of the feedback and, you know, possibly criticism. And it also helps you to work out, you know, where you can improve, because sometimes you you think you've done a bad job but you haven't, and or vice versa. So yeah, just ask for feedback often.
That's great. Right. Thanks very much, Mr.